What happens when the weakest becomes the strongest? For Alara Moonwhisper, life in the Silver Pine Pack meant silence. It meant keeping her head down, serving without question, and accepting that as an Omega she would never matter. She cleaned the pack house, she tended the gardens, she listened to whispers about how pathetic it was that even at 23 she hadn't found her fated mate. But when Alpha Kale Stormridge stood before the entire pack during the Harvest Moon ceremony and rejected her in front of hundreds of wolves, shattering their newly formed bond with words cold as winter steel, everything changed. And what happens next, no one was prepared for. Because the rejection didn't just break her heart, it broke something far more ancient, something that had been locked away since she was an infant, bound by magic and fear and desperate parents who thought they were saving her life. They were wrong. The ceremony had been perfect. Autumn leaves drifted through the eye, ceremonial grounds as the full moon rose over the mountains, painting everything silver. Alara had been arranging flowers near the edge of the gathering, trying to stay invisible as always when she felt it. The bond snapped into place like lightning striking her chest, and suddenly she could feel him. Alpha Kale. His emotions flooded through her, ambition, calculation, and beneath it all, a thread of something that might have been wonder. The user prompt is empty, so I cannot determine the primary language. However, based on the thinking block being in English, here is my summary. Architected narrative opening with protagonist rejection arc. Good start. I'm establishing the opening hook with the required pattern, introducing the protagonist Alara as an Omega, and setting up the rejection moment. I need to continue with Act 1, building up to the brutal public rejection. Let me continue with the ceremony scene and the rejection. Their eyes met across the crowd. His were amber, bright, with his wolf's presence. For one heartbeat, Alara thought she saw recognition. Hope. Then his expression hardened into something she couldn't read. He walked toward her through the parting crowd. Every wolf could sense it now, the bond forming, the moon goddess's choice being revealed. Alara's mother gasped from somewhere in the crowd. Her father made a sound like he'd been struck. Kyle stopped 3 feet away. He smelled of forest embers and ozone, of authority and storm-wrapped mountains. The scent should have been intoxicating. Instead, Alara's wolf stirred uneasily inside her, a presence she'd always felt as small and frightened. "The goddess has made her choice," Kyle announced, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. "She has chosen this Omega as my mate." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alara could smell their shock, sharp and metallic. Some wolves looked sympathetic, most looked confused. A beautiful she-wolf with auburn hair and eyes like polished copper stepped forward, her scent thick with cinnamon and barely contained fury. Sarah Nightshade, the beta's daughter, who everyone knew Kale had been courting. "Alpha," Sarah said, her voice dripping honey-sweet poison. "Surely there's been a mistake." "There is no mistake," Kale replied. Then he turned those amber eyes back to Alara, and she felt the bond pull tight between them, felt his wolf reaching for hers. "But I will not be bound by the goddess's whim. I will not tie my bloodline to weakness." Time stopped. "I, Kale Stormridge, Alpha of the Silver Pine Pack, reject you, Alara Moonwhisper, as my fated mate." The words hit her like silver bullets. The bond that had formed only moments ago began to tear, ripping through her chest with physical agony. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. White-hot pain exploded through every nerve as the mystical connection severed, leaving raw wounds in her very soul. She collapsed to her knees, a scream trapped in her throat. Around her, the pack watched in silence. No one moved to help. This was the Alpha's right, and to interfere would be to challenge his authority. "Speak the words," Kyle commanded, his voice cold. "Accept the rejection." Alara looked up at him through tears, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. The bond thrashed between them, dying but not yet dead, and through it she felt his emotions. Cold determination, yes, but also something else. Regret, uncertainty. And then those feelings were locked away behind walls of ice. Her voice came out broken. "I accept." The bond snapped completely, and the world went white with pain. When Alara could see again, she was on her hands and knees on the cold ground. Blood dripped from her nose. The pack was silent, and the silence was worse than any jeering would have been. It was the silence of witnesses to an execution. "Remove her from the ceremonial grounds," Kyle ordered. His scent now carried traces of ash and something bitter. "She is no longer welcome at pack. Functions." Two enforcers stepped forward, massive beta wolves with expressions of practiced neutrality. They hauled Alara to her feet, and she caught a glimpse of her parents in the crowd. Her mother's face was twisted with an emotion Alara couldn't name. Her father looked afraid. "Please," Alara whispered, looking at them. "Mom, Dad." Her mother turned away. Her father met her eyes for just a moment before shaking his head slowly. "You need to go," he mouthed. The enforcers dragged her past rows of watching wolves, past Sarah, who smiled like a cat with a cornered mouse, past younger pack members who'd mock her for years, past the elders who'd told stories of how Omegas were blessed by the moon goddess with gentle hearts but cursed with weak bodies. They didn't stop at the pack house. They didn't stop at the boundary of the residential area. They dragged her all the way to the edge of the territory, where the carefully maintained packlands gave way to true wilderness. "Alphas." "Orders," one enforcer said gruffly, not quite meeting her eyes. "You're cast out. 3 days to leave Silverpine territory completely." "But it's almost winter," Alara protested, her voice still raw from screaming. "The storms." 3 days. The other enforcer at least looked uncomfortable. "We'll leave you clothes and supplies at the border marker, but if you're found in our territory after 3 days, you'll be treated as a rogue." They left her there, in the fading twilight, with the first cold winds of winter beginning to howl through the mountains. Alara wrapped her arms around herself and began to walk, each step taking her farther from the only home she'd ever known. She didn't look back. The first night, Alara found shelter in a hollow beneath an overturned oak tree. She'd managed to grab the small pack of supplies the enforcers had left: a worn blanket, a water skin, some dried meat, and a single change of clothes. No fire starter, no weapons, barely enough to survive. 3 days, let alone make it to neutral territory. The temperature dropped as darkness fell completely. Alara pulled the blanket tight around her shoulders and tried not to think about the warm pack house, the communal dinners, the safety of sleeping surrounded by her pack's scent. X-Pack, she reminded herself. She had no pack now. Her wolf whimpered inside her, a sound of confusion and betrayal. The small, frightened presence that had always lived in her chest now felt even more diminished, as if the rejection had wounded it too. "I know," Alara whispered to the darkness. "I know it hurts." By the second day, the storm hit. Snow came down in sheets, turning the world into a white void. Alara stumbled through it, trying to remember her father's lessons about wilderness survival from when she was a child. Find shelter, stay dry, keep moving to stay warm. But she was already wet, and the cold had seeped into her bones. Her fingers were numb, her face burned with windburn. The scent of pine and ice filled her nose until she couldn't smell anything else. She found a half-collapsed barn as darkness fell on the second night. The roof was mostly gone, but 3 walls still stood, offering some protection from the wind. Alara crawled into the driest corner and wrapped herself in the now-soaked blanket. "This is it," she thought, feeling strangely calm. "This is how I die." Her wolf stirred weakly, a protest without strength behind it. "I'm sorry," Alara whispered, unsure if she was apologizing to her wolf, to herself, or to the moon goddess who'd given her a mate only to have him rip away the bond. "I'm so sorry." The cold crept in deeper. Her breathing slowed. The pain from the severed bond faded into numbness, and then into something that felt almost like peace. Alara's eyes drifted closed. She didn't know how long she'd been unconscious when the warmth woke her. At first she thought she was dreaming, or dead perhaps, and this was whatever came after. But dead people didn't feel this warm, didn't feel the weight of fur against their skin, or hear the soft sound of breathing all around them. Alara forced her eyes open, orchestrated dramatic narrative progression through perilous encounter sequence. "Good, I'm moving into Act 2 now. The near-death and rescue scene. I need to describe her waking up surrounded by the massive wolves, the counting moment, and then the reveal of the guard. Let me continue with this dramatic moment. Wolves surrounded her. Massive wolves, each one easily twice the size of any alpha she'd ever seen. They'd formed a circle around her, their bodies pressed close, sharing their heat. Steam rose from their fur in the freezing air. 1, 2, 3. Alara's sluggish mind tried to count them as her vision slowly cleared. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 enormous wolves, each one radiating power that made her Omega instincts scream warnings she was too weak to heed. Their scents were overwhelming: aged oak and winter, snow from one, sharp mountain stone from another, deep earth and moss from a third. Each one distinct, each one marking them as far more than ordinary wolves. The largest one, directly in front of her, opened its eyes. They glowed silver in the darkness, reflecting the faint moonlight filtering through the broken roof. When it met her gaze, Alara felt something shift in the air, like the world holding its breath. The wolf began to change. Bones flowed rather than cracked, fur receding into skin until a man knelt where the beast had been. He was older than Kale, perhaps in his late 30s, with silver threading through dark hair and scars crisscrossing his muscular chest. His eyes remained that eerie silver, and his scent, aged oak, winter snow, pine, and distant storm, washed over her with an intensity that should have been frightening. Instead, Alara felt her wolf stir for the first time since the rejection, not in fear, but in recognition. "You're alive," the man said, his voice deep and rough as gravel. "Good. We weren't certain we'd reached you in time." "Who?" Alara's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The man smiled, and it transformed his harsh features into something almost gentle. "My name is Theron Ashright, and we, little one, have been waiting for you." Waiting? Nothing made sense. The cold had frozen her thoughts. "Why would you wait for me? I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega who—" "You are not just anything," another voice said. One of the other wolves had shifted as well. A woman with silver blonde hair and pale blue eyes, her scent carrying notes of fresh snow and starlight. "You are exactly who the prophecy said you would be." "I don't understand." Theron settled into a sitting position, seemingly unbothered by the cold or his nakedness. The other wolves remained in their forms, pressing close to keep Alara warm. "Tell me," Alara Moonwhisper, "have you ever wondered why your wolf was so small? Why you struggled to shift, when other children managed it easily? Why you were designated Omega when you came from a strong bloodline?" "I'm just weak," Alara said automatically. It was what she'd been told her entire life. "The goddess made me this way." "No," Theron's voice held absolute certainty. "Your parents made you this way. They bound your power when you were an infant, locked it away behind magical chains so strong that your own wolf couldn't break free. They did it out of fear, out of ignorance, out of desperation to hide what you were." The words didn't make sense. Alara shook her head, which made the world spin. "My parents loved me. They loved you enough to try to save your life," the silver-haired woman said softly. "But in doing so, they nearly destroyed you. The binding was too strong. It was slowly crushing your wolf, suffocating your power. In another year, perhaps 2, it would have killed you." "Then how am I alive?" Alara asked. Theron's smile turned fierce. "Because that arrogant alpha rejected you. And when he severed the mate bond, the shock of it shattered the binding like glass. Your power is free now, Alara, and it is waking up." As if in response to his words, something stirred deep in Alara's chest. Not the weak, frightened presence she'd always known as her wolf. This was something else. Something vast and ancient and powerful enough to make the massive wolves around her whine softly in recognition. "What?" Alara pressed a hand to her chest, feeling energy building there like a storm about to break. "What is that?" "That," Theron said, his silver eyes gleaming with satisfaction, "is your true self. Welcome back, matriarch." Over the next hours, as the storm raged outside and the wolves kept Alara warm, Theron told her a story. A story that sounded like madness, but explained everything about her life. "Long ago," he began, his voice taking on the cadence of an old tale, "before the packs divided into territories and bloodlines were tracked like currency, the wolves were ruled by matriarchs and patriarchs, not alphas chosen by strength or birthright, but leaders blessed by the moon goddess herself with power beyond measure. They were larger, stronger, and possessed gifts that went beyond physical dominance. They could heal with a touch, command loyalty with a word, feel the emotions of every wolf in their charge. That's just a story, Alara protested weakly, a myth to explain the old days. It's truth, the silver-haired woman said. Her name was Lyra, she'd told Alara, and she was second in command of Theron's guard. And the proof is in the prophecy that's been passed down for 300 years. Theron recited it, his voice ringing with power in the darkness. When winter's cruelest moon hangs high, when bonds are broken, made to die, the matriarch will wake at last, released from chains of the past. She will be marked by lavender and light, born of weakness, crowned in might. She will come when hope seems lost, to reclaim what rejection cost. Alara's breath caught. Lavender and light? Your scent, Lyra said gently. Lavender, morning dew, and wildflowers. We've been searching for you for decades, following the prophecy's clues. Theron's own great-grandmother had a vision. She saw a child being bound, saw the suppression of power that would echo through generations. She saw us, her descendants, forming a guard that would one day find you and protect you. But why hide it? Alara asked, looking at Theron. Why bind a child's power? Theron's expression darkened. Because 300 years ago, the last matriarch was murdered. She was betrayed by ambitious alphas who feared her power, who wanted to rule without answering to a higher authority. They killed her and hunted down her bloodline, nearly wiping it out completely. A few survived by going into hiding, suppressing their power, living as normal wolves. Your ancestors were among them. My parents knew. The betrayal cut deeper than the rejection had. They knew the bloodline, Theron confirmed. When you were born during a blood moon with your eyes glowing silver, they panicked. They found a witch who specialized in binding magic and paid her everything they had to lock away your power. They thought they were saving you from being hunted. They didn't realize the binding would slowly destroy you. Alara's hands shook. Her whole life, every moment of being called weak, every time she'd struggled to shift, every humiliation had been a lie, a cage her own parents had built. The rejection freed you, Lyra said, her pale eyes sympathetic. The trauma of the bond breaking was strong enough to shatter the binding. Your power has been flooding back ever since. As if to prove the point, the presence in Alara's chest surged. She gasped, doubling over as energy raced through her veins like liquid fire. Her wolf, her real wolf, massive and glorious and fierce, rose up from the depths where it had been, imprisoned for 23 years. Finally, a voice said in her mind, rich and powerful, and nothing like the small, frightened whisper she'd always heard. Finally, we are free. Alara looked up at Theron with wide eyes. She's talking to me, really talking. She's been trying to reach you your whole life, Theron said. Now nothing stands between you. We are not weak, the wolf said, and Alara felt her anger like a physical force. We were never weak. They tried to cage us, tried to make us small, but we are thunder and moonlight. We are the matriarch, and we will bow to no one. I need to shift, Alara gasped, feeling the power building higher. I need to— Let it happen, Theron urged. Don't fight it. The first shift after a binding breaks can be violent, but we're here. We'll keep you safe. The wolves around them backed away, giving her room. Alara stumbled to her feet, her human body feeling suddenly too small, too fragile to contain what was building inside her. The shift began. Where normal shifts were controlled, practiced movements of bones realigning and fur emerging, this was transformation on a cosmic scale. Alara felt her bones begin to flow like water, lengthening and strengthening. Her spine extended, her jaw reformed. Power poured through her, reshaping not just her body but her very essence. Fur erupted across her skin, not brown like she'd expected, but pure silver white that glowed with an inner light. Her size increased dramatically, far beyond any wolf she'd ever seen. Energy crackled around her, visible as wisps of moonlight dancing through her fur. When the transformation completed, Alara stood on 4 massive paws, easily as large as Theron in his wolf form, larger even. She opened eyes that now burned with silver fire and looked down at the guard wolves who'd saved her. They had all shifted back to human form and knelt, heads bowed, in a gesture of complete submission. "She is the matriarch," Theron said, his voice thick with emotion. "The prophecy is fulfilled." Alara opened her jaws and howled. The sound shook the ruined barn, rolled across the mountains, and echoed into the storm-filled sky. It was a howl of grief for the years stolen from her, of rage at the lies she'd been fed, and of pure, undiluted power finally set free. Inside her mind, her wolf laughed with savage joy. "Yes," she said, "now they will see. Now they will all see." The days that followed felt like waking from a nightmare into a dream. Theron's guard, who called themselves the Unchained, had a camp deeper in the mountains, well beyond Silverpine territory. It was a settlement that had existed for generations, hidden by magic and geography, waiting for the prophecy to come true. Architected character development arc with training and bonding sequences. Good, I'm now moving into Act 4, the training and growth section. I need to show her learning to control her powers, bonding with the guard members, and developing confidence. Let me continue building this section out to around 1,500 words. There were cabins built from ancient timber, a great hall for gatherings, and training grounds where Alara quickly learned just how much she had to relearn about being a wolf. "Shifting should be second nature," said Marcus, a gruff older guard with rust-colored fur and a scent of copper and autumn leaves. "But you've had 23 years of fighting against a binding. Your instincts are all wrong. We need to retrain them." It was harder than Alara expected. Her wolf was powerful, terrifyingly so, but also wild after years of imprisonment. The first few times she tried to shift back to human form, she got stuck halfway, her body uncertain which shape it was supposed to hold. "Breathe," Lyra coached, her cool hand on Alara's partially formed shoulder. "Your wolf isn't your enemy anymore. You're not two separate beings fighting for control. You're one creature with two forms. Feel that truth." When Alara finally managed a clean shift back to human, she collapsed naked in the snow, laughing and crying at the same time. The Unchained celebrated like she'd won a great victory, because she had. As days turned to weeks, Alara discovered the full extent of her abilities. The healing came first. She'd cut her hand while cooking, and before she could even think about bandaging it, golden light flowed from her palm and the wound sealed itself. Theron explained that all matriarchs could heal, that it was part of what made them natural leaders. They could restore their pack, not just command them. The empathic sense was more overwhelming. Alara could feel the emotions of everyone around her, Theron's fierce protectiveness, Lyra's quiet contentment, Marcus's gruff affection. It was like hearing a dozen conversations at once, except with feelings instead of words. "You'll learn to shield yourself," Theron assured her, sensing her discomfort. "Right now, you're an open channel, but with practice, you'll be able to choose what you feel, and you'll learn to project emotions as well. Calm, confidence, authority. A matriarch can settle a panicking pack with just her presence." They trained every day, combat first, Alara learning that her new size and strength made her devastating in a fight. She could take down wolves twice her age with frightening ease. Then, control, learning to call her shift at will, to hold her human form even when her wolf wanted to run, to balance the two halves of herself into a unified whole. The Unchained weren't just teachers, they became family in a way Alara's birth pack had never been. There was Roan, a massive black wolf with golden eyes who told terrible jokes and could track anything that moved. He taught Alara to read the forest, to understand the language of broken twigs and disturbed earth. Sisters Ivy and Ash, identical twins with auburn fur and synchronized movements, showed her combat techniques that relied on speed rather than brute force. They moved, like dancers, lethal and graceful. Felix, the youngest of the guard at barely 30, had a gift for languages and taught Alara the old words, the formal speech of matriarchs and patriarchs that hadn't been spoken in common company for centuries. Kira, with her silver-streaked brown fur and scent of sage and smoke, was the camp's healer and historian. She had books, actual ancient books, that detailed the old ways, the responsibilities of a matriarch, the structure of a proper pack. Dimitri, a scarred veteran who smelled of leather and steel, never spoke much but watched everything. He positioned himself between Alara and potential threats without her even asking, a silent guardian who'd sworn his life to her before they'd ever met. Gray, whose name matched his smoke-colored fur, could move through the forest like a ghost. He taught Alara to hunt, to take down prey cleanly, and give thanks to the moon goddess for the sustenance. And then there was Theron, commander of the Unchained, holder of the prophecy, and the wolf who'd saved her life. He was patient when she struggled, fierce when she needed pushing, and gentle when the weight of her new identity threatened to crush her. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fire in the great hall. "The pull between us." Alara nodded slowly. "Is it the mate bond? But I thought, after Kale rejected me—" "It's not a fated bond," Theron said, his silver eyes reflecting the firelight. "The moon goddess chose Kale for you, but that doesn't mean he was the right choice. Sometimes fate needs correction. What you feel for me, what I feel for you, is a chosen bond. It's rarer than fated mates, and some say it's stronger because it's built on respect and understanding rather than destiny's decree." "I barely know you," Alara protested, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't quite true. She knew how Theron took his coffee, knew that he checked on every member of his guard before sleeping, knew that he sometimes woke from nightmares about failing to find her, about arriving too late. "You know my soul," Theron said simply, "and I know yours. The rest is just details." He didn't push, didn't demand anything from her, just sat beside her night after night, a steady presence, while Alara rebuilt herself from the ground up. 6 weeks after her rescue, Alara woke to Roan bursting into her cabin. "Matriarch," he said, using the title she still wasn't used to hearing. "We have a problem. There's a scout at the border, Silverpine pack colors." Alara's blood went cold. "They found us?" "Worse." Roan's expression was grim. "The scout saw you during your morning run. You were in your wolf form, and there's no mistaking what you are. He ran before we could stop him. He'll be reporting back to his alpha by nightfall." Theron was already in the great hall when Alara arrived. The rest of the Unchained assembled around the massive wooden table. Maps covered the surface, showing the territories surrounding their hidden settlement. "They'll come," Lyra said bluntly. "Kale rejected you publicly. He cast you out to die. If word spreads that not only did you survive, but you're actually the matriarch from the old prophecies, his authority will be questioned. He can't afford that." "He'll bring an army," Marcus added. "Every able wolf in the pack. They'll want to finish what the rejection started." "Then we give them what they expect," Alara said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. Her wolf stirred, eager and angry. "Let them come. It's time they learned the truth." Theron studied her face. "You're sure? We could relocate, disappear deeper into the mountains. The Unchained have done it before." "No," Alara shook her head. "I'm done running. I'm done hiding. They cast me out like garbage, expected me to die like a weak Omega who couldn't survive without her pack." She met Theron's eyes. "Let's show them what they threw away." The army arrived 2 days later, as Hanot. The sun set on the third day. Alara heard them before she saw them. The sound of dozens of paws hitting frozen ground, the rustle of fur through underbrush, the scent of 25 wolves moving through the forest with violent intent. She stood in the clearing in front of the great hall, wearing simple clothes that wouldn't matter if she needed to shift quickly. The Unchained flanked her, still in their human forms, projecting an aura of calm confidence. The Silverpine wolves poured into the clearing like a flood. At their head, Alpha Kale Stormridge stood in his wolf form, massive and black-furred, his amber eyes glowing with fury. Behind him, Sarah Nightshade prowled with copper-colored fur that matched her human hair, her scent sharp with excitement. The invading wolves surrounded the clearing, cutting off all escape routes. They outnumbered the Unchained more than 2 to 1. In conventional terms, it should have been a massacre. Kale shifted to human form, his naked body a display of alpha dominance. "Alara Moonwhisper," he said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. His scent, forest embers, ozone, and steel, washed over her, and Alara felt nothing. The bond was gone, and with it, any hold he'd had on her heart. You were cast out, ordered to leave Silverpine territory, yet here you are, squatting on our borders, spreading lies about prophecies and power. I'm well beyond your borders, Alara replied calmly. This is neutral territory, has been for 200 years. Check your maps. You're spreading dissent, Sarah snarled, stepping forward in her wolf form, claiming to be something from myth, trying to undermine the natural order. Omegas don't become queens, you're a fraud. Then why did you bring an army? Theron asked, his voice cutting through Sarah's rage like a knife. If she's just a lying Omega, why do you need 25 wolves to handle her? Kyle's jaw tightened. She's contaminated these rogues with her delusions. We're here to bring them to justice and end this before it spreads further. Is that what you tell yourself? Alara asked. The power inside her stirred, responding to her anger. That you're doing this for justice, or are you terrified that I survived? Terrified that rejecting me, your fated mate, was the biggest mistake of your miserable life? You were weak, Kyle roared, his wolf flickering just beneath his skin. Unworthy. I will not apologize for choosing strength over destiny? Alara interrupted. Over honor? Over the will of the moon goddess herself? You rejected me because I made you look weak, because you couldn't stand the idea of an Omega mate when you had Sarah warming your bed and whispering ambitions in your ear. Sarah snarled, fur bristling. You know nothing about— I know you're going to attack, Alara said calmly. I can feel it. Your rage, your jealousy, your pathetic need to eliminate anyone who threatens your position as the Alpha's chosen mate. She smiled, and it was her wolf's expression, all teeth and no warmth. So go ahead, Sarah, be the first to learn. Sarah lunged. She was fast. Beta blood made her quicker than most wolves. Her copper fur blurred as she launched herself across the clearing, jaws open, aiming for Alara's throat. Alara simply reached up and caught her. One hand, human and seemingly delicate, closed around Sarah's throat mid-leap, stopping the attacking wolf dead in the air. Gasps rippled through the Silverpine wolves. Sarah struggled, confused and frightened, but Alara's grip was immovable. You see, Alara said conversationally, holding Sarah at arm's length as the she-wolf twisted and clawed uselessly. The thing about being bound for 23 years is that when the binding breaks, all that suppressed power comes back at once. She met Kyle's shocked eyes. The moon goddess didn't make a mistake, Alpha. You did. She released Sarah, who collapsed to the ground gasping. Before any other wolf could move, Alara shifted. The transformation was instantaneous. One moment a small human woman, the next an enormous silver-white wolf that towered over every other wolf in the clearing. Her fur glowed with inner light, her eyes burned silver fire, and the power that radiated from her made every Silverpine wolf instinctively flatten their ears and tuck their tails. I am the matriarch, Alara said, her wolf's voice projecting into the minds of every wolf present. I am the power you tried to destroy, the weakness you mocked, the Omega you threw away to die. She took a step forward, and 25 wolves took a step back. Kneel. The command hit them like a physical wave. Wolves collapsed, unable to fight the authority in that single word. Beta wolves whimpered, young fighters trembled. Even Kyle, powerful alpha of Silverpine, found his legs buckling as the weight of true dominance pressed down on him. Behind Alara, the Unchained shifted, and they were not normal wolves. Theron's wolf was massive, matching Alara's size with silver fur that flickered like starlight. Lyra transformed into a wolf of pure white, frost forming in the air around her. Marcus's rust-colored form crackled with heat. Each of the Unchained revealed their true nature, dire wolves, the ancient guards of matriarchs, blessed by the moon goddess with power that made modern alphas look like puppies playing at war. The Silverpine army stared in horror at what they faced. Their 25 wolves against 11 creatures of legend. The math no longer mattered. Kyle forced himself back to human form through sheer willpower, though he remained on his knees. Mercy, he gasped, the first time Alara had ever heard fear in his voice. Matriarch, mercy. Alara shifted back to human, standing naked and glowing in the clearing, every inch a queen. You rejected me, she said softly. Cast me out to die in winter, refused me even the basic shelter you'd give a rogue seeking sanctuary, and now you beg for mercy. I was wrong, Kyle whispered. Around him, his pack remained frozen, unable to rise against her command. I was arrogant and foolish and wrong. The goddess chose you and I. I thought I knew better. I thought strength was all that mattered. But true strength, I see it now. Alara felt his emotions through her empathic sense, genuine remorse, crushing shame, and beneath it all, the dawning realization of what he'd destroyed. The mate bond might be broken, but he could still feel the echo of what they'd almost had. You don't get to die, Alara said. That would be mercy, and you haven't earned it. She looked at Sarah, who was still crouched on the ground, trembling. You don't get to escape either, Sarah Nightshade. You wanted to be alpha female so badly you encouraged his worst instincts. You whispered poison in his ear and smiled when I suffered. Please, Sarah whimpered. Here is my judgment, Alara declared, her voice carrying with supernatural clarity. Sarah Nightshade, you are stripped of your rank. You will serve the lowest members of your pack, the Omegas you once mocked, and you will learn what real strength looks like. Kyle Stormridge, you will remain alpha, but you will reform your pack. No more will Omegas be treated as lesser. No more will strength be the only measure of worth. You will rule with wisdom, or I will return, and I will not be merciful a second time. She took a step closer to Kale, looking down at the kneeling alpha. And you will send me my parents. They have much to answer for. Your will be done, matriarch, Kale said, and she felt the truth of his submission through her empathic sense. He'd been broken and rebuilt in the span of heartbeats, his worldview shattered and reformed around the undeniable reality of her power. Alara turned to address the entire Silverpine force. This is my territory now, she declared. These mountains, these forests, they belong to the Unchained and to all wolves who seek shelter from packs that have forgotten the old ways. Any wolf who is rejected, who is cast out, who is deemed too weak by those who should protect them, they will find sanctuary here. She felt the ripple of shock through the gathered wolves. It was a direct challenge to every pack's authority, a promise of refuge that would undermine the current power structures. I am Alara Moonwhisper, the matriarch, she said, and I am done hiding what I am. The Silverpine wolves retreated as soon as she released them from her command, scattering into the forest like leaves before a storm. Kyle left last, shifting back to wolf form and looking at Alara one final time with amber eyes full of regret before vanishing into the trees. Sarah remained, stripped of her rank, her submission complete. When they were gone, Alara felt Theron's hand on her shoulder. That was well done, he said quietly. Mercy and justice in equal measure. I was tempted to do worse, Alara admitted, feeling the rage still simmering in her chest. But you didn't. That's what makes you the matriarch. Theron gently turned her to face him. You chose the harder path, the one that will actually change things rather than just satisfying your anger. I'm still angry, Alara said. Good. Use that anger. Build something better. He smiled, and it reached his silver eyes. You have that power now. The camp celebrated that night like Alara had never seen. Wolves howled, fires burned bright, and for the first time in her life, Alara was surrounded by people who saw her clearly and valued her, not despite what she was but because of it. Her parents arrived 3 days later, escorted by members of the Silverpine pack who quickly departed once their charges were delivered. Her mother and father stood in the great hall, looking small and frightened before their daughter, who now towered over them in every sense that mattered. You bound me, Alara said without preamble. Locked away my power, made me weak, let me suffer for 23 years. Why? Her mother, Sylvia Moonwhisper, a former Alpha's daughter who'd always seemed so strong, looked broken. To save your life, she whispered. When you were born with silver eyes during a blood moon, we knew what you were. We knew the bloodline lived on in us. And we knew what happened to the last matriarch. She was murdered, Alara's father, Thomas added, his voice thick with old grief. Betrayed and killed by wolves who feared her power. We thought if we hid what you were, if we made you seem like just another Omega, you'd be safe. You made me a victim, Alara said, her voice cold. Every insult, every humiliation, every time I was treated as lesser, that was your doing. We know, Sylvia said, tears streaming down her face. We know, and we'll never forgive ourselves. But Alara, please understand. We had just watched packs hunt down and kill 2 of your distant cousins. They were young matriarchs who'd revealed themselves, thinking the world had changed. They were wrong. They were slaughtered, their entire families destroyed. We couldn't let that happen to you. So you chose to kill me slowly instead, Alara said. The binding was crushing my wolf. In another year, Theron says it would have destroyed me completely. Her parents had no answer to that. They could only stand there, bearing the weight of their daughter's judgment. Alara felt Theron's steady presence beside her and drew strength from it. Here is my ruling, she said finally. You will stay here, in my territory, and you will serve. You will help rebuild what your fear tried to destroy, and perhaps in time you will earn forgiveness, but it will not be today, and it will not be easy. We understand, Thomas said, and we accept. As the weeks passed, word spread. The matriarch had returned. The old prophecies were true. In caves and clearings, in pack meetings and secret gatherings, wolves whispered about what it meant. Rejected wolves began appearing at the border of Alara's territory. Omegas cast out by cruel alphas. Wolves deemed too weak to keep. Those who'd been abused and broken by the modern pack structure that valued only strength and dominance. Alara welcomed them all. The settlement grew, cabins multiplying as Theron's guards worked alongside the newcomers to build something that hadn't existed in 300 years, a true pack led by a matriarch where every wolf was valued. One evening, as spring began to thaw the mountain snows, Alara stood with Theron on a cliff overlooking their growing community. Fires dotted the valley below, each one representing a wolf who'd found sanctuary. You've changed everything, Theron said, his arm around her shoulders. We've changed everything, Alara corrected. You and the Unchained, you kept the faith. You found me. Without you, I'd be dead in that barn. The goddess led us to each other, Theron said. He turned to face her, his silver eyes serious. Alara, I want to ask you something. The chosen bond between us. I feel it growing stronger every day. I'm not asking for an answer now, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you ever are, I would be honored to be your mate, your partner, your equal. Alara felt her heart swell, not with the desperate, painful intensity of the fated bond with Kyle, but with something deeper, steadier, built on respect and understanding and the slow growth of real love. Not yet, she said softly, touching his scarred cheek. I need time to fully become who I'm meant to be. But Theron, ask me again in a year. Ask me when this pack is established and I'm not still healing from what they did to me. Ask me when I'm whole. Then I'll wait, Theron promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. A year. A decade. Whatever you need. That night, as Alara lay in her cabin listening to her pack, her real pack, settling down for sleep, she felt her wolf stir contentedly. We are no longer alone, the wolf said. We are no longer caged. We are exactly what we were always meant to be. Yes, Alara whispered into the darkness, yes we are. But the peace wouldn't last forever. Already Alara could feel it, the resistance from traditional packs, the fear from alphas who saw their power threatened. And in her dreams, she sometimes caught glimpses of something worse, an ancient darkness stirring, drawn by the return of the matriarch. The old enemies who'd killed her predecessor 300 years ago had descendants too, and they wouldn't welcome the return of the old order. Let them come, her wolf said fiercely. Let them all come. We are ready. And standing at the window, looking out at the spring stars, Alara smiled. She was ready too. And so, Alara Moonwhisper's journey truly began. Not as a weak Omega rejected and cast aside, but as the matriarch returned, the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. She'd been forged in the fire of rejection, tempered by near death, and reborn in power that could shake mountains. She'd built a sanctuary for the broken and a beacon of hope for the forgotten. She'd chosen mercy when vengeance would have been easier, wisdom when anger would have been justified. What happens when the weakest becomes the strongest? They change the world. But Alara's story was far from over. The traditionalist packs would push back. The old enemies would reveal themselves. and when the blood moon rose 3 times in a single year, an omen the ancient texts called the harbinger's sign, darker forces would emerge from the shadows. Would Alara's newfound power be enough? Would the Unchained stand firm when true war came? And what would happen when Cale Stormridge, consumed by guilt and the memory of what he'd destroyed, tried to win back the favor of a queen who'd moved beyond him? Those are questions for the next chapter of this story. For now, in the Spring Mountains, under the watchful eyes of the moon goddess, a new order was taking root, and at its heart stood a silver-white wolf with eyes of fire, once rejected, once dying, now reborn. The matriarch had returned, and the world of wolves would never be the same. If you enjoyed this story of rejection, redemption, and reclaiming power, please hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what you'd like to see happen next. Will Alara accept Theron as her chosen mate? Will Cale find redemption or remain consumed by his mistakes? What happens when the blood moon rises and ancient enemies return? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in Alara's journey. Share this video with anyone who loves werewolf romance, strong female characters, and stories about rising from the ashes stronger than ever. Thank you for listening to the tale of the rejected Omega who became the matriarch, the wolf blessed by moonlight who was cast into darkness only to emerge as the brightest star in the sky. We'll see you in the next chapter.